Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Wa qallu alhamdulillahi alladhi thaqana wa'dahu. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Mawlaya salli wa sallim da'iman abada ala habibika khairil halki kullihimi Muhammadun sayyidul qawnayn wa saqalayn wal fariqayn min arabin wa min ajami. Alhamdulillah. Just to very quickly, as we had no etiquettes, standing etiquettes, just to very quickly recap those. So firstly, when a person attends the gathering of zikr and nasiha, you should eliminate any internal distraction that yourselves have, anything that is distracting you from, and another one is actually turning this phone off. And you see, sometimes actually shaitan can cause a distraction. So this is one thing a person can do, is to firstly rectify their intention that they're here for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly is then to have a clear mindset that anything that is taught to me, to act upon it with a firm intention. You're not here for enjoyment purposes, you're actually here to try to better and transform your lives in the most beneficial way possible. As we try to discuss week in and week out, that actually your time is dwindling away at your very eyes, almost like the sand in a hourglass, as though each and every second is passing at your very notion. And sometimes when you contemplate certain elements of time, is that a dream can feel like a dream is actually hours and hours and hours, when you have a dream at night. But when you wake up in the morning, if you never had a clock to measure the time, how would you know that that dream has lasted 6 or 7 hours? Or several hours of your night has passed in you in that dream. The dream may seem only very short. And that's really, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to tell us, indicate to us that actually this life is but a dream. It is actually passing by very quickly. If someone was to ask, Jamel, how old are yourself now? 36. Where has 36 years gone? He can tell me some memories, the things that stand out in the moment. Because sometimes when you put a person in a spot, that's what they truly remember. How you understand or whatever. You will tell me certain highlights of your life that are very important to yourself. But those highlights itself have substance to the highlights, meaning there are sometimes years and years and years, and you might only describe them to me in a matter of seconds. So was the moment really hours and hours and hours, or days and days and days, or was it seconds? For me, his moment is seconds, but for himself, it was a lifetime to create. And that is really where the substance of time is. You think about your life here, it is very shallow, it is almost a limitation that we have. And we try to fixate ourselves so heavily in this life, we actually forget about the next life. And that is one thing a person comes to the majalis for, is that if you're coming here, sure, there has to be a purpose. You can't come here haphazardly. If you've come for somebody else or you've come for some other purpose, then truly the benefit is not there for you. Actually, you will fail. Maybe not today or within 1 year or 6 months. At some point, the distraction of dunya will catch up to you. And you yourself will lose the objective and purpose. So that is why sometimes very important when you come to the gathering, actually fully rectifying yourself. And then when I say something, or whenever whoever is delivering the bayan actually advises, is to make intention to not only listen, but to act upon it. There is far too many people out there in the world that do a lot of lip service, far too many. You can open up YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and find these people. They're not hard to come by. They're very, very common. So if you want something for lip service and stories, then only real benefit for that is actually if you yourself take hold of this benefit, and you take hold of the benefit. If you're going to come in, you shut the door, and next time you come in from the side door. Okay, so when you come in when you come for this purpose, is that the time itself is you should realize this. Sometimes this is why you can easily get distracted as well. One little thing puts off the speaker. So this is why. What was I saying again, Heather? Can you remind me?
You were talking about time and how there's lots of people that do lip service.
Ji. So yes, mashallah, you mentioned what I was talking about lip service, the people who actually are doing a lot of this and very little action. So the people who do more of this and less action, they are not hard to come by. You find them very common. So that is why I'm trying to emphasize to you now in this particular point, that when you come to the majlis, it should be a real reformation for the week or for the day or even for the hours that you're here. Or you take it home and some light you carry forth into this. So it shouldn't be a case where you come and that's it, you listen to what I have to say. And also take away this notion that, oh, that's my brother speaking, that's my husband speaking, that's this person speaking, that's my son. Forget this. Because one thing when you have this mindset is that actually you lose more benefit. Because then you start to believe that this person, maybe he's saying it and it doesn't apply to me. The message is the message. I will say the message. Don't care who you are. The message is straightforward. It is, I am not speaking from myself. Sometimes I may summarize or give an example for your own understanding, but the message is crystal clear in the book. There's a reason sometimes why is that we have to speak in chronological order, is that it's easier for then a person to follow through a complete journey. We've gone through the test of people, the test of dunya, the test of shaitan, and now we go on to the actual test of nafs. So one thing I came across, it's not really relevant to the subject, but more relevant to the etiquettes, and I saved this part towards the end. So the question is, so somebody asked a question and they wrote down the book, and it's not a Muslim book, but when you realize that actually non-Muslims also follow this methodology too, that how to learn quickly and deeply. How do you learn something quickly and deeply? So it mentions here, people who cling to their delusions find it difficult, if not impossible, to learn anything worth learning. A people under the necessity of creating themselves must examine everything and soak up learning the roots of a tree, just like the way the roots of a tree soak up the water. And what they give an example is of a tree. The tree itself does not benefit from the rainfall. It is when it falls onto the ground, and then when the ground builds up the moisture, it actually feeds into the tree, and tree can grow hundreds and hundreds of feet. But if you block the tree, any moisture entering the tree will actually die. And it says here, when you enter a new environment, your task is to learn and absorb as much as possible. For that purpose, you must try to revert to a childlike feeling of inferiority. So here you become a child, as though you don't know anything. Like a child, a small baby, you tell them what language to learn, what numbers to learn, what language to speak, they learn. They don't say, oh, we already know something. They don't know anything. So they are like an open book, like a blank piece of paper, empty. You can write on whatever you want. You change your mindset. I know completely nothing. I know nothing. You sit here with this mindset, you'll absorb everything. And then that's the beginning. You then absorb the information, allow the information to manifest, and there the growth will come. It's a simple concept. Non-Muslims use this concept. There's no real need for me to go into further, but I'll actually share this picture and you can have a read of it as well. So over the last couple of weeks, I've managed to cover some portion of the shaitan, as you've been seeing maybe on YouTube or other, is that you see there's another thing inside us as well, apart from the shaitan. meaning shaitan is not inside us, but the shaitan manipulates this part of us. And it is a very cunning, particular creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when, it's almost how the Mashaykh have summarized in a way, that when the spirit entered into the body then craved the feeling of the spirit. So the spirit was exposed to heaven, was exposed to Jannah, was exposed to palaces, to houses, to means of transport. The spirit was exposed to all of this. But the body, when it manifested the spirit, it didn't know what to do. So from the body, the nafs was created. The nafs, not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created and put it inside the body. And the nafs is the one that manifested this. So when it looks around and sees houses in the dunya, it has a want. When it sees cars and transport and wealth and money, etc., and all these things, that's where the desire comes from. Because it knows that the spirit has had this. So what it tries to do is the shaitan manipulates this part, and then it causes our body to react. Our body to react. That, okay, the shaitan might feed us into something. You need this. You need a girlfriend, for example. And then it creates this desire inside you. Or the spirit gets this in paradise. The body can also achieve this. Shaitan is creating this manipulation between the nafs and the body. And then our own intellect cannot differentiate. So it's said that it is always instigating evil. And nafs al-ammara bi'so. For it is the most harmful of enemies. Its tribulation is the hardest form of tribulation. To purify from people, like I've already said to you, is very easy. To purify the want of wealth is very easy, meaning the dunya itself. To distance yourself from shaitan, it's a slightly difficult task, but it's achievable. Now what we are asking is that something that actually lives inside you, distance yourself from this too. Distance yourself from the nafs itself. So what he's saying is that its treatment is the most difficult of all things. Its sickness is the most perplexing form of sickness, and its remedy is the most problematic means of healing. There are two reasons for all that. It is an enemy from within. When the thief from within the house, it's very hard to outwit him. They've given an example of a thief entering into your home. Once he's in there, he's going to do as much damage as possible and take as much things as possible. And the damage is very great. And he has narrated a poetry when one of the famous poets actually mentioned this, that my lower self tempts me to do what harms me, multiplying my diseases and my aches and my pains. How can I outwit an enemy when my enemy is lodged between my ribs? The second point, one of the most important points, is that it's a beloved enemy. If you don't know your nafs, as they mention here, and the human being is blind to the fault of his loved one. He hardly notices his fault. Deeply reflect upon this. They're emphasizing that your nafs al-bi'su al-amara, is beloved to you. It is your friend. It is made out to be something that you love. And unless you can clearly distinguish this false love that you have for it, you will forever remain within its grasp and its trap. Almost like a rat that has been caught by bait and by poison. It's because it is poisonous, it is harmful. But the reason being is that you have created it so beloved to yourself that you cannot see fault in it. If somebody criticizes your nafs, you go straight on the defensive mode. How can you talk about me like this? Who are you to tell me off? Why have you said this about me? Or why have you said this about so and so? And such a thing. That is where the nafs can be wound up, and it can flare up very quickly. Almost like the Mashaykh have described, the nafs is like a highest form of a rash that you scratch a little bit and it flares up. And they said that this is like the nafs. The nafs can stay calm all the time. Occasionally you scratch it, but then when it's time, you give it a real scratch and then it flares up because you pain. And you realize, oh, what have I done? You think, oh, why have I allowed this to happen? When really the problem is that you have made a friend or something beloved to something that is your enemy, unless it's tamed. The nafs itself, it can be tamed and it can become a nafs al-mutma'inna, meaning the highest form of nafs. But that is something that we need to understand the theory behind it before you actually go on to doing it. So it's something that you can't just achieve nafs al-mutma'inna when your actual nafs itself, you cannot even differentiate what is wrong and what is right. That is why when somebody criticizes, it always has to be with the grounds of Allah and His Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, or the grounds of the one's Mashaykh. You cannot criticize on the basis of your own nafs, because then it is what? It is a clash of two nafs then. Nafs within myself and nafs within somebody else. And they have further said on the point, you see no fault in one endowed with love and brotherhood, not even a trace of one, since you are happily content. You see, what is it? You see no fault in one endowed with love and brotherhood. You see sometimes is that because you see such love in people is that you can't actually criticize them because you love them so dearly for whatever reason. Maybe there's sometimes different love of one's mashayikh, different reasons, and the love of the Ahlullah and the Ahlul Tasarruf and the people of the Ahlul Tasawwuf as well, the Sufaha, the Sufiya Ikram, and then you love them. I love Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam because of the way you have understood, love Sahaba, the Ahlul Bayt, and all the pious and righteous people, we have love for them. So you very rarely, when somebody criticizes them, you get angry a little bit. Why is it that person mentions such and such about somebody you love? And it is like if somebody was to come into this room and start swearing at your mother, for example, you would think, hang on a second, why is it you say this? And then it's almost like they are attacking your love. So when somebody attacks you and your nafs, is that there are two ways to actually perceive this. One is that you can actually take upon this advice and act upon it, listen and hear it out if it's constructive. The second one is actually by thinking, it's not my nafs, it's the other person that's talking. If you know a person on the haqq and you can't say anything back, then the person should remain silent or give a wise response. And I want to mention that this explains why the human being takes a positive view of everything bad in his own lower self and hardly notices any fault belonging to it. And one of the wisdoms of the Tazkiyah program is that actually when a person is purifying themselves, they are learning to criticize themselves as well. Learning that I am flawed in this area, learning I am flawed in this area. So never should a person on the program, on the Tazkiyah program, ever say when a person is openly doing wrong, ever suggest that they're actually doing something right. They should always, even when they are doing the things wrong, they should never say that this is actually right. Rather, no matter how right it feels, actually stay silent on the matter. It is always on the verge of plunging him into disgrace and destruction. Yet, he is quite unaware of this, unless Allah Azza wa Jal protects him by His gracious favor and helps him against it by His own mercy. You must take special note of one sharp-witted, persuasive observation, namely this. If you look closely, you will discover that this observation of the lower self is the root of every temptation, disgrace, ignominy, ruin, sin, and disaster that has ever occurred in Allah's creation. And disaster that has ever occurred in Allah's creation or will ever occur, from the beginning of creation till the day of resurrection. They are referring to the time of Shaitan and the dealing with between Shaitan and Adam alayhi salam. When Shaitan and Adam alayhi salam, when Shaitan was created and he was given the heavens and the earth to roam around in. And Shaitan was a dear beloved servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he actually had another name before he was given the name Iblis. He was actually given the name Izazil, meaning the Blessed One. And he was given this title, and he was also the head of the Malaika as well. He had such a title. He was the leader of the angels. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to test him, because how could you get tested? It's like, I give an example, in the mosque, very rarely you get tested. Maybe you have something internally, but it's not really going to manifest. So Shaitan himself, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him and created Adam alayhi salam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked Shaitan to bow down to Adam, Shaitan said, Ana khair, I better. He is fire, I am fire, and he is of clay. Oh Allah, I will prostrate to you, but I will not prostrate to him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, you must prostrate to Adam alayhi salam. You must prostrate to this creation of mine. All the angels prostrated. Shaitan refused. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then referred him to Iblis, the cursed one, or the one who was expelled. So then there was a conversation between Shaitan and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Shaitan turned around and said, Oh Allah, I want to make one dua. I want one request from yourself. I'm paraphrasing now, this is mentioned in the Quran too. And they said, Oh Allah, I want one thing. I will misguide all of those people except who? Those who are sincere. He will not misguide those people who are sincere. Sincere to what? Sincere to you, Allah. Sincere to the path. Sincere to the way. Sincere to the prophets. And this is really a testimony of what happened, is that Shaitan had built up this arrogance over many, many, many thousands of years, that he was the leader, he was the king, he was the one on top. At the moment Allah said, now it's time for you to lower yourself. Shaitan said, no, ana khair, I'm better. And that's what ultimately led to his demise and his downfall. And all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks of us is to not follow in the footsteps of Shaitan. And when Allah asks us to do something, to do it. And to prevent the harm from Shaitan coming, to be sincere in the things we do. Because if we are not sincere in the things we do, we're still susceptible to the temptation of Shaitan himself. Again, something on the tariq, in the tazkiyah program, that is fine-tuned and programmed in such a way, not only are you self-critical, but you're actually at the same time developing a strong connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through ikhlas. So this is where sometimes is that when this process and methodology actually takes place, you start to eliminate some of the negative qualities inside you automatically. So whereby you would have otherwise been exposed to something, test of Shaitan, you're not being exposed anymore. This is where ease is actually formed. So inshallah, we will I'll just finish off this last part. So those evil things that a person are susceptible to are either due to the lower self alone or brought about with its help, its participation and its assistance. The very first sin of disobedience against Allah was committed by Iblis, and the cause of it after the preceding decree was the passion of the lower self with its arrogant pride and its envy. So shaitan actually possessed all three of the major negative traits: arrogance, jealousy, and pride. There are so many things regarding, one is the jealousy. Jealousy, the Prophet ﷺ mentions, jealousy burns through good deeds, just as fire burns through wood, whether it's manifested or not. Arrogance, whoever has an atom's weight worth of arrogance will not enter paradise. So really, when we reflect and contemplate upon these elements of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we actually seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Actually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually protect us from the obvious threat of shaitan and nafs, and we can actually start to build up a barrier between the threat, the obvious harm that is apparent. And inshallah, sometimes is that one thing we can actually take away from this and how to act upon it is that, like we described, is that firstly, a person should never ever leave themselves, meaning they shouldn't allow themselves to go on and on, months and months and months, without having a one-to-one as such. They should actually strive and struggle to doing and having the one-to-one, and also sitting in good company quite frequently. Because one thing by doing this is that firstly you develop the relationship with one's ustad and mentors, and then you work with them to particularly iron out your own deficiencies. It's like Hassab said on Monday, I think it was on the back of your Blessed Self feedback, that a boxing coach, remember this bit when they mentioned about the boxing coach is not necessarily himself the best boxer, but he knows how to make somebody else a better boxer. So you yourself might be awliya Allah or whatever, but then you go to mashayikh who obviously, of course, in our case are awliya Allah. They will support us and help us, meaning that they themselves have traveled the path and they can teach us the path. And also there's something else to reflect upon. The mashayikh mentioned in a bayan many years ago, and I mentioned it in the beginning about when a person is dreaming, I just want you to take this note about death. Death itself is that when you're asleep, Heather, if I asked you now, are you conscious right now?
Yeah.
What are you conscious of?
Everything around me.
Everything around you, mashallah. So when you're asleep and you're dreaming, what are you conscious of then?
Your thoughts.
Which thoughts? Which thoughts?
It could be just things that you're thinking about before, or just things that were in the back of your mind at the time.
Okay. So when you contemplate this enough and you come to realize actually Mashayikh Hassab actually teaches this, your consciousness, and it really brings more substance into the reality of one's muraqabah, that when a person transfers the consciousness, you transfer the consciousness because the consciousness has the ability to be outside the conformities of your body. That when you're asleep, so if you say, based on your concept is that what you're trying to suggest, not that it's, meaning there is a right answer, but if you think about it, I've mentioned a very important point here. When you're sleeping, you sleep for 7, 8, 9 hours. Why does it only feel like 10, 15, 20 minutes? Maybe even less sometimes. Why is it you need to sleep in order to pass the time? Or why is it when you don't sleep, it feels like a very long time? Because your consciousness, it goes into a different place, where the concept of time is not the time of this world. So when you think about it, when you actually die, you take that with you, that consciousness. So in a sense, when you sleep, you're actually like this with death. You like this with death. That is only a permanent transfer into that realm and then you're dead. Is a dead person conscious? Why not? Because that consciousness is no longer in that body now. It's gone. Gone where? To the next life. It can't be a case that your life is simply you live it, you make memories, and you're thrown into a hole. It's not this. If it was the case that then there would be no need for anything. That prophets indicated when the Prophet ﷺ came, and they tried to teach us and show us a way how to connect with that realm beyond this realm. By not only living it, experiencing it. That I gave an example to somebody as well, that imagine myself and Jamal are having a private conversation now. Nobody can hear. Nobody, just me and Jamal, such a private corner. Jamal tells me a secret. Jamal tells me that tomorrow the skies will bleed. The skies will bleed, for example. You're sat here with me in the corner. Somewhere in the middle of the desert, thousands of miles away, no phone, no email. Somebody has said, Jamal said this about tomorrow. What would you think? You would think, that is not normal. How do they know this? How do they even know who Jamal is? How do they know who Abid is? They would think this person is actually a crazy person. But the reality is, Rasulullah ﷺ came with something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he taught us this reality. So Rasulullah ﷺ has come with something from somewhere else, with divine revelation, and his aqwal and ahwal, the sayings and doings of the Prophet, meaning his actions and sayings, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he told us, Allah said this about this particular time, about this particular person, about this type of people, about this place in the world, about the sun will rise from the west, about the appearance of Dajjal. 124,000 prophets came, only one ever said they would come back. And meaning that is Isa alayhi salam. But how is it that Isa alayhi salam is the only prophet to ever come back? Why is this information known information? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew this before he was ever exposed to any religion. Because he's come with information from someplace else. So when you really start to contemplate and reflect, actually the reality of the afterlife becomes more apparent. And this life becomes a mere drop. It is like when they say a person dies and they say, and you think, how is it that the person even knows what I'm going to say? You hear the hadith about, on the day of judgment this will take place, or after death this will take place, or this will happen, or that will happen, for example. And they will say, on Yawmul Qiyamah you will conversate with people. You'll conversate with people. And someone will ask you, imagine me and Heather actually walk past one another and say, oh Heather, how are you? Or I might have died before him, or he died after, vice versa. And he goes to me, how long did you live for? You will ask me, how long did you actually live in this life for? I would say, maybe a day, part of a day. That would be my response. And when I ask Jamal, if he tells me his memories, it's mere seconds when he was to describe it. So, inshallah, that's just to basically, we conclude on that point. And inshallah, if anyone does have any questions before we move on to the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then does anyone have any questions to ask? You can leave the table here, inshallah, just turn the light off.